Anniversary as we take a close look at where things stand tonight. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. President Trump says the best thing Kim Jong-un could ever do is to make a deal with the U.S. The president also promising the North Korean leader he will not suffer a similar fate to the late Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi should he play ball with Washington. Kim's government has threatened to cancel next month's planned summit in Singapore, a position many chalk up to leveraging for position. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off, as he often does tonight, from the North Lawn with the president's latest take on this subject. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. We haven't heard much from President Trump on the subject since North Korea started going squishy on the idea of a summit. But today, the president was in a chatty mood and still optimistic that North Korea will come to the table.
Wolf, good evening. There is no question.
In the Oval Office with NATO's Secretary General today, President Trump revealed that despite intemperate language from North Korea in recent days, his June summit with Kim Jong-un appears to still be on track.
Mr. President, North Korea today, any question about North Korea?
Well, nothing has changed on North Korea that we know of. We have not been told anything, and if it does, that's fine. If it doesn't, I think we'll probably have a very successful meeting.
In statements made earlier this week, North Korea singled out comments from National Security Advisor John Bolton, who described to Chris Wallace what he said was the White House's vision for North Korean disarmament.
We have very much in mind the Libya model from 2003, 2004. There are obviously differences. The Libyan program was much smaller, but that was basically the agreement that we made.
North Korea was only too quick to remind the world that 8 years after Muammar Gaddafi shipped his nuclear program to Tennessee, the U.S. turned on him, U.S. and NATO jets helping to overthrow Gaddafi, who was later murdered in the streets by an angry mob. With the National Security Advisor looking on, President Trump today said the model for North Korean disarmament will be much different than Libya.
Well, the Libyan model isn't a model that we have at all when we're thinking of North Korea. In Libya, we decimated that country. We never said to Gaddafi, oh, we're going to give you protection. We're going to give you military strength. We're going to give you all of these things.
The president indicated that in return for dismantling his nuclear program, Kim will get guarantees, economic, security, and political.
He'd be in his country. He'd be running his country. His country would be very rich.
What security guarantees are you willing to
Well, we're willing to do a lot, and he's willing to, I think, do a lot also. And I think we'll actually have a good relationship, assuming we have the meeting and assuming something comes of it. And he'll get protections that will be very strong.
But President Trump also warned the Libyan model could loom in Kim Jong-un's future.
Now, that model would take place if we don't make a deal, most likely. But if we make a deal, I think Kim Jong-un is going to be very, very happy.
The president has talked about wanting to reduce the size of the U.S. protection force in South Korea, down from the current 28,500 troops. North Korea has long demanded that the U.S. remove troops from South Korea. Today, President Trump wouldn't say if that is on the table.
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to say that he will have very adequate protection, and we'll see how it all turns out. I think the best thing he could ever do is to make a deal.
In his meetings with the NATO Secretary General today, President Trump also highlighted the differences between how he is prepared to treat North Korea and how he may treat Iran going forward, saying that any new sanctions against Iran will be, quote, brutal. Brett?
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Let's take a deeper look now at what a Kim-Trump summit might look like. Correspondent Rich Edson is at the State Department tonight with that.
The uncertainty of planning a meeting between two unpredictable leaders.
It may not happen quickly, it may happen later, but this president is ready if everything is on track.
State Department officials say they're still targeting a June 12th meeting in Singapore between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The president claims North Korea is coordinating with the U.S. on planning, despite threats to cancel the summit. U.S. and North Korean officials will try to agree on how Kim surrenders his nuclear program, what North Korea receives in return, and when it will receive it. A top State Department diplomat has just floated a plan where North Korea would offer a big down payment. According to Susan Thornton, the acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, quote, "The question is what could be front-loaded in a process that's inevitably going to go on for some time? And then what would be acceptable to the North Korean side in return for that front-loading?" Republican Senator Marco Rubio tweeted, "This is why I will do all I can to prevent Susan Thornton from ever being confirmed as Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. She is in Tokyo undermining POTUS by advocating for partial surrender of nukes by North Korea as acceptable." Though the State Department says Thornton's full comments match Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's position.
What Susan Thornton was talking about is very similar and the same thing to what Secretary Pompeo spoke about, and that is that we would like to see a bigger, bolder, different, faster deal than the kind of deals that have been proposed before.
The State Department says the United States wants an upfront demonstration beyond promises from Kim Jong-un that he is willing to surrender his nuclear weapons. The South Korean government, also a target of recent North Korean complaints, is offering to mediate between the United States and North Korea, trying to ensure that this summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un actually happens. Brett?
Rich Edson at the State Department. Rich, thanks. The U.S. and China are back at the bargaining table as new negotiations aim to avert a trade war. A few minutes ago, President Trump tweeted a photo of his meeting with Vice Premier La Ha. This comes as the president today said China has been ripping off the U.S. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House to tell us the president had choice words for a lot of people tonight.
China's become very spoiled. The European Union has become very spoiled. Other countries have become very spoiled because they always got 100% of whatever they wanted from the United States. But we can't allow that to happen anymore.
Just as the second round of trade talks between the U.S. and China got underway in Washington, President Trump took aim squarely at Beijing, saying the Chinese can and should cut billions from their trade surplus with the U.S.
We have been ripped off by China. An evacuation of wealth like no country has ever seen before.
Among the administration's lead negotiators, the Secretaries of Treasury and Commerce, the President's chief economic advisor, and a pair of trade officials, including Peter Navarro, who authored the best-selling book Death by China, which is said to have upset some Chinese negotiators and nearly scuttled his participation in the talks. For the president, a steady barrage of tweets underscored his position that, quote, the U.S. has very little to give because it has given so much over the years. After threatening to set its sights on new tariffs on U.S. aircraft, soybeans, and auto imports, Beijing appears to have relented when the president asked the Commerce Department to take a fresh look at restrictions that crippled Chinese telecom giant ZTE. Critics have warned that the president's aggressive trade tactics could spark a global trade war, with China, the EU, NAFTA partners, Canada and Mexico, even Japan now all threatening to implement new tariffs on the U.S., with Tokyo alone set to impose levies on exports worth about $409 million.
Trade has been a total one-way street. Right outside of this nation, you take money out like it's by the bucket loads. I could name almost every single country in the world. We had nobody representing us. And now you have somebody that's very good at this stuff, me, representing us.
Asked if he thought the talks would end well, the president quipped, "I tend to doubt it." Perhaps a reflection of the high intensity and high stakes of the negotiations. Brett?
Kevin Corke in the White House briefing room. Kevin, thank you. President Trump is donating his first quarter salary to the Department of Veterans Affairs as his search continues for a nominee to lead that agency. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders presented a check from the president to acting VA Secretary Robert Wilkie during the White House briefing today. The president has pledged to return his entire salary to the federal government and has used the symbolic check handover to highlight his administration's policy efforts. President Trump is once again calling out Democrats and others for their support of the special counsel into alleged Russian collusion during the 2016 election. That probe began 1 year ago today. This comes one day after the president's lawyers said Robert Mueller, the special counsel, has acknowledged to them there can be no indictment. So on this anniversary, let's take a closer look at the Mueller investigation, how it started, where it is right now. and possibly where it's going. Here's Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge.
On Twitter, President Trump welcomed the country into the second year of what he calls, quote, the greatest witch hunt in American history, adding, there's still no collusion with Russia, only collusion by Democrats. On Fox, the president's lawyer went further.
In this case, I think we're going to have to look into whether we can challenge the legitimacy of the entire investigation. Maybe a special prosecutor, special counsel never should have been appointed, not based on an illegal leak.
A year into the special counsel probe, new details emerged about its origin in the summer of 2016 and a major pivot by the FBI.
We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts.
3 weeks after the Clinton email announcement, the FBI launched a counterintelligence investigation codenamed Crossfire Hurricane, probing Russian contacts with the Trump campaign. By early August 2016, according to text messages, FBI agent Peter Strzok, later removed from the Russia case for anti-Trump bias, went to the U.S. Embassy in London and interviewed a key witness. An investigative source confirmed to Fox details first reported by the New York Times, that the FBI also obtained phone records and other documents using secret national security subpoenas. The Times said there was at least one informant who met with Trump campaign aides Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. The president claimed in another tweet that the Obama FBI spied on the Trump campaign and said, if true, it's bigger than Watergate.
I haven't spoken with him directly about that, but certainly seen the reports, and if there is any truth to that, it should certainly be looked into.
By August 2016, then CIA Director John Brennan briefed then FBI Director James Comey, as well as the Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, on Russia's election interference. This letter from Reid became one of the first public acknowledgments of the secret Russia probe. In October, the FBI and Justice Department obtained the first surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aide Carter Page, based on opposition research funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign, the so-called Trump dossier.
Almost 2 years since the FBI opened its Russia investigation, the president's legal problems extend to his personal dealings with lawyer Michael Cohen, with a new report that missing files motivated the leak of Cohen's financial records to the media. Brett.
We'll stay on it all. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Some serious political maneuvering tonight on Capitol Hill. It involves House Republicans, their effort to strengthen food stamp work requirements, and the push to resolve lingering issues over immigration. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel tonight on the tactics and the strategy.
There could not be a better time to take action to help more people join our workforce.
Part of the House Speaker's pitch for support of a 5-year Farm Bill extension. But as GOP leaders try to round up the final votes to pass it, the House Freedom Caucus is trying to flex some muscle on immigration in exchange for support on the Farm Bill.
The vast majority of our members believe that we should have a vote on immigration before we have a vote on the Farm Bill. We were not able to convince any of our members to go from no to yes on the Farm Bill, and so we will have further discussions tonight with leadership, but at this point there is no deal to be made.
This comes as some moderate House Republicans are trying to force Ryan's hand on an immigration bill by being willing to work with Democrats. At least 20 Republicans have signed on to the so-called discharge petition. Ryan has tried to hold them off by saying he wants an immigration plan that President Trump would be willing to sign.
We wanted to see if we can do our own immigration bill. So we've been laboring to get 218. It's clear that we don't have 218 for a specific bill.
House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi called the effort by GOP moderates to force immigration action very beautiful.
Rank and file, and really even more established than that, members on that House and in the House on the Democratic and Republican side have come together on a bipartisan bill that they have constructed, that they have gained support for, and that they have made now part of the discharge petition.
Conservatives are not amused by moderates making this play and are signaling what they want. The idea being something close to a security-first plan offered by Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte.
The fix is we got to keep compromising within the conference as Republicans on the Goodlatte bill and find the sweet spot that will pass into law.
Fox has learned GOP leaders plan to offer the Freedom Caucus a date next month to consider that conservative immigration bill. If the Freedom Caucus doesn't take it, leadership could pull the Farm Bill from the floor tomorrow and hold it until the House has taken action on that immigration package. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. The Senate has confirmed the president's pick to run the Central Intelligence Agency. Senators approved Gina Haspel by a 54-45 vote this afternoon. 6 Democrats voted in favor of Haspel. 2 Republicans voted against her. Haspel's nomination had been contested by some senators, unnerved by her role in the post-9/11 enhanced interrogation program. How the impeachment process against a Republican governor could hamstring GOP candidates possibly in the November midterms. We'll have a report from Missouri when we come back. U.S. birth rates declined last year for women in their teens, 20s, and 30s. The CDC says that led to the fewest babies born in 30 years. Experts say several factors may be combining to drive the declines, including shifting attitudes about motherhood and changing immigration patterns. A unit of Wells Fargo handling business banking reportedly improperly changed information on documents related to corporate customers. The Wall Street Journal reports workers added or altered information without customers' knowledge. This unit is separate from Wells Fargo's retail bank, which has been dealing with its own sales scandal. The markets today, stocks were down. The Dow lost 55. The S&P 500 was off 2. The Nasdaq dipped 16. Embattled Missouri Governor Eric Greitens says a former campaign manager sabotaged him by stealing a donor list Greitens is accused of using illegally. Tonight, there are growing concerns Greitens might not only face the ultimate political embarrassment of impeachment, but he might take some fellow Republicans down with him. Case in point, the GOP Attorney General, who has prosecuted Greitens and is a huge piece of the party's plan to hang on to the U.S. Senate in November. Correspondent Matt Finn fills us in.
It's a tough situation for our state. It's a sad situation for our state.
In the Show Me state, Republican State Attorney General Josh Hawley wants to show voters that despite political turmoil over scandals involving the Republican governor, he is the best candidate to unseat veteran Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill this fall. Hawley's office led the investigation into Governor Eric Greitens' new felony charge of allegedly misusing a charity donor list for political purposes. Greitens denies any wrongdoing and in a statement wrote in part, "I will have my day in court. I will clear my name. As all faithful people know, in time comes the truth." This after prosecutors dropped a felony invasion of privacy charge this week over a photo Greitens reportedly took of a woman with whom he had an affair. Hawley has called for the governor's resignation and is not backing down.
The way I look at it is I have a job to do as Attorney General. I have a job to do on behalf of the people of the state, and I'm going to do my job, and the chips fall where they may.
Hawley, dubbed by Politico as the GOP golden boy, won President Trump's endorsement and tells Fox News he's doing his best to navigate his way through a troubling time in Missouri's Republican politics.
I feel for all of the families who are involved. I have a job to do as Attorney General of the state, and I'm going to keep doing my job.
Democrats are champing at the bit to take advantage of the situation.
I think it's going to have some impact on it. I think you are now seeing the Attorney General start to distance himself from the governor.
Despite the drama between Hawley and the governor, Hawley's Senate campaign seems to be doing okay. A recent poll shows McCaskill and Hawley in a virtual tie. McCaskill has a well-funded war chest. Her campaign most recently reported more than $11 million cash on hand compared to Hawley's $2 million. In a critical Senate race that might determine control of the U.S. Senate, it's yet to be seen how much of a thorn the governor's drama will be in Hawley's side.
This is a nightmare scenario for Republicans in the state.
The special session to consider Governor Greitens' impeachment begins here tomorrow at Missouri State Capitol, and the process could last for months, potentially turning into a dark cloud hanging over Hawley's Senate campaign all the way into the August primary. Brett?
Matt Finn in Missouri. Matt, thanks. Hawaii's Kilauea volcano has erupted from its summit, and officials are now telling people in the path of the ash cloud to get out. Correspondent Jeff Paul is once again on the Big Island tonight.
An explosive morning wake-up call on Hawaii's Big Island
as the Kilauea volcano erupted, shooting a plume of ash some 30,000 feet into the sky.
There was a short-lived explosion, but a pretty powerful one.
Today's eruption prompted a shelter-in-place warning. Residents were told to keep their windows closed and be prepared for ashfall and even small rock fragments.
The volcano, it's a real dynamic situation up there. We could have additional, events like this morning that punch up and then die back down really quickly. We could have some more sustained ash.
This comes just a day after scientists found 2-foot-long volcanic rocks not far from the summit, possibly signaling the beginning of a larger steam explosion that could shoot out boulders this size of refrigerators.
This is the kind of event that we had been expecting might happen at Halemaumau based on interaction of the dropping lava levels with groundwater. So this explosive event is consistent with what we were thinking might happen.
And as for the so-called big one, geologists say it's a waiting game.
It's hard to predict these kind of things because it's got several different factors: the amount of water, the amount of rockfall that could go in and choke up the hole. All these variables are hard to predict, and so there may not even be a big one.
There are also concerns of toxic gas below the volcano summit. Elevated levels of sulfur dioxide forced several schools in the area to cancel classes, and now first responders are in place, ready to respond in the event of a mass evacuation. Brett?
Jeff Paul live on the Big Island tonight. Jeff, thanks. Up next, new international pressure on Israel over the use of deadly force in defending its border. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York has a crash involving a New Jersey school bus and a dump truck leaves a student and an adult dead. Dozens of others hurt there. The Paramus School District says the bus was taking students from Eastbrook Middle School to a historic site called Waterloo Village. Q13 Fox in Seattle as Democrat Mayor Jenny Durkin signs the city's controversial tax on employees of large companies. The measure is opposed by firms such as Amazon and Starbucks. Supporters say it will raise $48 million a year to pay for affordable housing and homeless services. And this is a live look at Sacramento from our affiliate Fox 40. The big story there tonight: California prosecutors say 10 children rescued from a filthy, abusive home were subjected to waterboarding, shot with crossbows, and had scalding water poured on them. Their mother, Ina Rogers, is charged with 9 counts of felony child abuse. The father, Jonathan Allen, has pleaded not guilty to charges of torturing his children. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We're outside the Beltway, too. We'll be right back. Israel says it carried out airstrikes on militant sites in Gaza overnight in response to aggression from across its border. This comes as Arab foreign ministers hold an emergency meeting 3 days after the opening of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. That is where correspondent Connor Powell is tonight.
Up. Overnight, the Israeli military striking Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip after a machine gun fired on a house in the Israeli border city of Sderot. The damage to the home was minimal and no one was hurt. But hopes that the tensions over Gaza may be reduced appear to be diminishing. Arab leaders today joined the European Union and the United Nations Secretary General to call for an independent investigation into the recent violence.
We call for a credible international investigation into the crimes committed by the occupation on the Gaza borders in the last few days.
For 7 weeks, Palestinians in Gaza have clashed with Israeli soldiers along the security fence. Israel has come under intense international criticism for its use of live ammunition on both violent and non-violent protesters. More than 100 Palestinians, many of them members of Hamas, have been killed, thousands more injured. Israel blames Hamas for using the demonstrations as cover to attack the security fence. The Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, moved closer this week to asking the International Criminal Court to officially open a criminal case against Israel. In the past, Abbas had pledged not to pursue such a move. But after the White House cut funding for the Palestinian Authority and President Trump decided to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, Abbas appears set to ask the ICC to open an investigation against Israel. Hamas has called for the weekly Friday protest along the Israeli security fence to continue, but following Monday's bloodshed and with the start of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan, it isn't clear how many Palestinians are willing to return to the border tomorrow. Brett?
Connor Powell in Jerusalem. Connor, thank you. Some news now on the home front. Fox News has its first female CEO. Today, Suzanne Scott was named Chief Executive Officer of Fox News and Fox Business Network, making her the only female CEO currently running a major TV news organization. She is a 22-year veteran of this company. Scott most recently served as president of programming for Fox News Channel and Fox Business Network. Jay Wallace has been appointed president of Fox News and executive editor. Up next, the panel on President Trump's insistence that the summit with North Korea is still a go. First, beyond our borders tonight. Congo's latest Ebola outbreak has spread to a city of more than 1 million people. It means the deadly virus might travel more easily in densely populated areas there. The city is on the Congo River, a crucial travel corridor in the vast country and upstream from the capital, a city of about 10 million people. The Vatican investigator sent to take testimony from Chilean sex abuse victims says Pope Francis is making history with his emergency summit of the Chilean hierarchy. Francis summoned the Chilean Bishops' Conference to Rome for 4 days of meetings and prayer after admitting that he had made grave errors in judgment in the case of a Chilean bishop accused of witnessing and ignoring abuse. And the European Union is calling for an end to President Trump's threats to slap tariffs on EU steel exports as a new deadline looms for the duties to take effect. In March, the president imposed tariffs of 25% on steel imports and 10% on imported aluminum. The EU has a temporary exemption, but only through the end of this month. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
Nothing has changed on North Korea that we know of. We have not been told anything, and if it does, that's fine. And if it doesn't, I think we'll probably have a very successful meeting. But we have not been told anything. We're just reading stories like you are. We've heard certain things from South Korea, but we'll see what happens. If the meeting happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, we go on to the next step. I want to give everybody the benefit of a doubt. I think that I can only say our people are literally dealing with them right now in terms of making arrangements for the meeting.
President Trump pretty expansive on the possibility of that summit June 12th in Singapore with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, seeming to hope to get it back on track as the North Koreans sent out a shot, if you will, about military exercises with South Korea. This is President Trump met with the vice premier of China today, tweeting out a picture saying that meeting went well. As China plays a significant role, obviously, in all of this, plus the China trade negotiations that are still continuing. With that, let's bring in our panel. Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. A.B. Stoddard. She is the associate editor at Real Clear Politics and host of No Labels Radio on Sirius XM, and Eli Lake, columnist for Bloomberg View. Okay, Jonathan, what's the inner workings of the White House think about the possibilities of this summit June 12th? I heard Kellyanne Conway saying, it could be delayed.
I think it's always been an uneasiness, and almost everything was going too well for a while. Kim Jong-un released the hostages and theatrically destroying nuclear facility. But John Bolton has always been, the National Security Advisor has always been very, very skeptical about even the notion of Donald Trump going over there and meeting with them. So he's been through this carousel before, and he does not trust the North Koreans, has never had faith in the idea that you can take them at their word. So I think you have a very, very tough hardliner there with John Bolton, who is talking to the president every day and informing him about the history and the promises that they've made before. That being said, I'm told the president still wants to do this. He wants the meeting face to face, and they're carrying on as if nothing has changed.
Speaking of Bolton, he was obviously mentioned by the North Koreans in the statement specifically. He also told Chris Wallace something that raised some eyebrows and got some response. Take a listen.
And we have very much in mind the Libya model from 2003, 2004. There are obviously differences. The Libyan program was much smaller, but that was basically the agreement that we made. And so we'll want to test North Korea in this first meeting for evidence that they have made that strategic decision.
The Libyan model isn't a model that we have at all when we're thinking of North Korea. In Libya, we decimated that country.
So, AB, I mean, the Libyan model he's talking about, Bolton's talking about, is how they got rid of their weapons and their ability to start down that program, not the actual end of Muammar Gaddafi and how it all came to an end.
But that's what the North Koreans see, and that's what they're concerned with, and that's what President Trump was referring to today, once again speaking from a different songbook from someone at the highest levels of his government. It's happened before, and he actually offered the North Korean leader some protections today if he agrees to denuclearize. So, look, I do think that the administration, and particularly the president, is handling this in a very shrewd way. Whatever it is, whether it's saber rattling or whatever Kim Jong-un is doing by canceling the talks with the South Koreans, threatening the U.S. And inserting all this tension, I think they've responded well. The president said, "I'm trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt." They're obviously still trying to avert war. They're still trying to create a discussion. I bet everything Jonathan is saying is true about Bolton's influence and sort of tempering the president's expectations. But I think they're handling it the way it needs to be handled. Kim Jong-un cannot be trusted. He took those hostages to release them. And so far, he has been way too acquiescent in his language for a goal of that regime to be believable. So, as the president says, we'll see. But I think that they just need to try to keep the prospect of this alive while being cautious.
Yeah, Eli.
Well, I would just say that I've been concerned about the North Korea outreach for some time. But, in the context of the China part of this, where it seems that, Trump is reversing himself on the ZTE sanctions, and this is after a long and rigorous and legal process. I just think that all of this is sending the wrong signal at this point. The United States sets certain norms, particularly when it comes to issues of nuclear proliferation and things like that. The Libya model is basically getting rid of your nuclear program. Isn't that what we're talking about? When the North Koreans talk about denuclearization, what they mean is breaking the U.S.-South Korea alliance. So if we don't have clarification at this point on it, then I don't really have a lot of optimism for these talks, as much as I think it's admirable that the president is at least trying. And I would hope that he can use the fact that someone like John Bolton is his national security advisor as a bit of leverage, and perhaps to intimidate a tyrant like Kim Jong-un. But this should be very troubling. Of course, the Libya model is what we're seeking. We want to get rid of their nuclear program. What else are they supposed to be talking about?
Yeah. In the campaign we did candidate casino. I don't have a fancy graphic, but let's do Summit Casino. You've got $100 in chips here, and 100 it's moving forward definitely. June 12th in Singapore. 0 is it's dead in the water. So where are your chips down the road, Jonathan?
Probably 60.
I'm 175. I think the date could change, but I think it's going to happen because Kim Jong-un wants it to happen.
50.
Eli.
I don't know.
Come on, man.
Really,
you can't
strong.
do that.
I mean, could you do 55?
Yeah.
I didn't think we would get this far, but I'm worried. If they can't even agree, the point is to talk about denuclearization, then why even have the summit to begin with? It just confers undue legitimacy on this thug.
Have some courage, mate.
All right.
There you go. 2
green chips on either side. I got you, Eli. Thank you, panel. Stand by. Next up, the 1-year anniversary of the Russia collusion probe. What's next?
If they realized or acknowledged they didn't have the power to indict, both under the Justice Department memo, and then the next day or the day after, they clarified it for Jay Sekulow, who was with me at the meeting, that they didn't have the power to indict. It's all about a possible impeachment. Impeachment has to come before indictment.
There are actually
two memos in the DOJ. One says the president can be indicted. The other says the president cannot be indicted. You might have to indict him to stop the running of a statute of limitations.
Well, it is the one-year anniversary of the Mueller probe. How much longer is it going to take? We don't know. What will come next? We really don't know. The president tweeting out, congratulations, America. We are now into the second year of the greatest witch hunt in American history, and there is still no collusion and no obstruction. The only collusion was that done by Democrats who were unable to win an election despite the spending of far more money. We're back with the panel. Eli, it's hard to believe it is 1 year. We're awaiting an IG report, Michael Horowitz, and that could come really any day, that will look at the beginning of the investigation and the Clinton email investigation. Where do you think this goes, the Mueller probe, and how much longer?
First of all, these traditionally independent counsels can go on for years and years and years. So, I mean, we already saw a little glimpse of this with Judge T.S. Ellis. Was like, we're now hearing stories about the United Arab Emirates, and we're seeing FARA issues and other things like that. So it's possible that Mueller could start with collusion and end in a very different place, as the Clinton administration certainly knows from their experience with initially Whitewater, which sort of ended in Monica. Now, all of that said, I think that there is an important point to make, which is that at this point we have not seen anything to back up the original charge that there was a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russian government to use these hacked emails, to try to win the election. It's one thing for the intelligence community, which we sort of didn't even need the intelligence community to tell us, that the Russians wanted Trump to win. They didn't hack his emails. But it's another thing to get to that point of what's been called collusion, and we haven't seen that evidence yet. And once again, we saw with the Senate Judiciary Committee releasing the transcripts this week, the meeting in Trump Tower, which was used as sort of Exhibit A for a while of this collusion narrative, what ended up happening? It had nothing to do with any of it. The information that was promised was never delivered. Yes, Donald Trump Jr. Was eager for such dirt, but he never got it. Instead, it was a discussion of Magnitsky Act sanctions.
Yeah, Jonathan, the president seems to go up and down as far as his anger level about this and his expression of that on Twitter. This latest story about informant or informants inside the Trump campaign used by the FBI, noted in the New York Times story today, that seemed to be interesting timing coming out ahead of the Horowitz Inspector General report, seems to have gotten a lot of attention in the West Wing.
It's also getting a lot of attention in circles around the president outside the White House, conservative circles, people that he listens to, whether it be people on Capitol Hill or in the media, well, conservative media. This idea that there was a quote-unquote spy inside the campaign. What it could also be is simply the FBI doing their normal investigative work, and they were investigating to see whether there was a role that the Trump campaign played with the Russian government. So it would make sense that they were trying to contact people and monitor people who were associated with the Trump campaign. So we need much more information on that, but certainly the suspicion of a spy is something that's circulating not only within the White House but within pro-Trump circles around the White House.
AB, what are you hearing on the Hill?
Well, for a long time, there was the sort of spectacle of the House Intel Committee and Devin Nunes running up to the White House to get information that he would bring back to Capitol Hill and then run back to the White House to share with the president when he got it there to begin with. And members would say, we're just going to wait until they come up with a report.